Welcome to another episode of the Untethering Shame podcast, where we're talking all things shame and how we can begin to disentangle ourselves from this oppressive system of thinking. Today's topic, menopause. Menopause is something many of us are taught to fear. It's the start of the end of your life. It's like the face tattoo that says that you're getting old and that your body is out of commission in the ways that we've been socialized to celebrate and support it. And unfortunately, like many things in women's health, it isn't something we learn about in a curious and an empowering way. So when you reach menopause, you feel stuck, alone, ashamed, and in this perpetual state of grief and uncertainty. So let's open the door for another conversation. What if we could see menopause from a place of curiosity and openness? What if we got excited to continually connect and reconnect with our bodies in a way that allows us to show up for it, regardless of its hormone profile, age, size, or symptoms? This is why I am so excited to be joined by Clarissa Kristjansson today to do just that. Clarissa is a menopause health coach and mindfulness practitioner passionate about helping women holistically take control of their menopause symptoms, mind, body, and soul. She's the host of her own podcast, Thriving Through Menopause, which I had the opportunity to guest on a while back. So I'll be sure to include a link to her show and our episode in the show notes so you can check that out and dive deeper into the topic of menopause with her as you see fit. Okay, let's get comfortable, turn off all of your other devices and distractions, and let's dive in. Clarissa, welcome. I'm so excited you're here.
Oh, Cara, I'm so excited to be here. It's been a while since we talked, but yes.
Oh, I know. I dropped my daughter off this morning with my mother-in-law and I said, I had a podcast recording this morning. She's like, oh, what are you talking about? And I was like, menopause. And she stopped and she goes, I have shame around menopause. Do I feel shame about this? And I said, well, let me just ask you a couple questions. And I just started running through the list of things that people experience shame around. She goes, oh, yep. Looks like I'm going to be listening to this episode when it's released. So I'm very pumped. I think when we talked on your show and sort of my take talking about shame as a shame therapist, as someone who is working on shame resilience, but somebody who's coming kind of from this place of learning to reframe my mindset before I experienced menopause. I think it's something such a different place to sit in and to be. And I think enough of us, I know we were talking offline, we're not having these conversations in the ways that we want to. So I'm curious before we jump in, tell me if you could describe just how you're feeling about life, this conversation, this topic. If you could just describe what you're feeling in one word, what would it be right now?
Excited.
Yeah. As the vibration is coming through my voice, obviously I match you in that. I can't. Yeah, it's an interesting thing, I think, to be excited about a topic that we know is painful and hard and overwhelming. And yet I think the excitement comes from recognizing when we create safe spaces to explore and to rethink the way we talk about these things. Is that kind of what comes up for you when you think about that?
Yeah, I think that it's actually such a transformative time of our lives. And so we shouldn't be just fearing it. And I'm speaking from a perspective of somebody who had a really tough time with my mental health, particularly my emotional health, the resurfacing of my childhood trauma. And at the same time, the journey that I've been on and where the place it's taken me from a corporate role to working with fabulous women around the world can only be described as transformative. There's, and it's amazing if we are supported and we do a lot of reframing of our own narrative.
Well, and so it's interesting because I've only met you at this point where you are in this role of let's empower ourselves, each other. Let's change the conversation. Let's call out the bullshit that's happening. That's not real empowerment, but just shame and in sheep's clothing. And it sounds like that wasn't how you started your experience. So tell me how, when you started your menopause journey to now, where you are in this role, what happened? What shifted? How did you get here?
Yeah, well, that's a great story. And of course, I will try and condense it for the listeners. But, I had so much going on in my life at that time. I would have been about 44, 45 years old. I had become a mum. I mean, I had a relatively small child. He was 6 going on 7. So I didn't have some sort of empty nesting.
Right.
My mum had dementia and my marriage was going south at a rate of knots, and all this. And so my body was somewhere at last on the line. And I'm going to say something, and I hope that people are okay with this, but I stood in the shower and there's all this large amounts of blood coming out. And I'm thinking, oh, that's a bit odd. Why are the clumps coming out of me? And I thought, oh, well, never mind. And that was kind of where I was at. And then those years were, then I was a single mom and my mom had passed away. And all I'm doing is, it's like being on this conveyor belt and you think, I wonder if I can find the stop button, but actually I can't.
And do I want to even?
Do I want to?
Yeah.
Can I? I have a child, I have a job, I have a mortgage, just so much responsibility. And so, you're experiencing all these things. No one was talking. I mean, we are going back 17, 18 years ago. Who talked about perimenopause? Who talked about menopause? Nobody. And so you go to the clinician, you say you don't feel very well. And I share the heart palpitation story with Oprah because here I was living in Sydney, Saturday morning. I'm in the clinician saying, I've got something going on with my heart. And they're doing ECGs and going, you're fine. No mention of menopause. You've got a slightly high pressure. Here's some medication. You'll be fine. And it sort of rolls on like that until the anxiety overwhelmed me. And I knew I'd reached a point where I couldn't continue this way. And I had to make my own journey. But I was joining dots by then,
Well, and that's what I'm wondering. So is the anxiety, what's happening with my body? I'm not getting any clear answers. Or was it some other shifts that were happening in tandem with that? Because like you said, you had kind of conditioned yourself to be my body's an inconvenience. It gets in the way when it's tired, when there's blood in the shower. Like I have to walk away from that because I've got bills to pay. I've got a kid to take care of. I've got to keep moving. So what was the part that really was tipping the scales towards that anxiety side?
It was, and funny enough, it was the job situation. And I think we're learning and unfolding now how many women are experiencing difficulties at work. And the corporate world is brutal. I mean, it's brutal. It doesn't actually matter whether you're in menopause or not.
Right.
If you are, if you're postpartum, if you're IVF, if you are menstruating, it doesn't. And if you're LGBTQ or if you're a person of color, let's just forget it, because it's not very. It doesn't. The
system is against you. Yeah, exactly.
So I think then when things started to derail there, that's when I thought, oh, and I think it creates fear. And it wasn't so much that I maybe felt shame for myself, but I felt fear, real fear. What if I lose this job? And I used to think, wow, I'm not coping. And I know that I'm not on my game like I had been 8 years or so earlier.
Right.
And really horrible. And they're horrible feelings to wake up feeling that kind of fear when your child is at a critical stage in their schooling. You have this huge mortgage that you have to pay each month. And like loads of us, even if we're well paid, we're not living, a year, 2 years paycheck away. We're living a few paychecks away from disaster. And that's a horrible thing. You're cash poor, but you're actually kind of asset okay in my case. And that was scary, really scary. And I just had to call and, draw a line. And what I did at that stage was I found a psychotherapist. And she happened also to be the founder of a big mindfulness training organization. And it's when you come together in a group of other people in that space and you realize, gosh, I'm not alone here in feeling my emotions. People were not all at the same age or the same stage, and there were guys in there too, but there was a community there. And she led that community so beautifully. And I noticed a shift. Beautiful, beautiful way she kind of allowed you to feel safe space. She created fantastic safe space for us to share, talk about our experiences, learn our mindfulness practices. Incredible, really.
You had kind of lost connection with your body. That had happened 8, 10, 15, 20 years. Who knows at what point, like sort of a slow erosion, but then it was gone. You were sort of existing in it, but not connected with it. You were losing a connection in the corporate world. And maybe it wasn't a connection you wanted or needed, but you had it and that was gone in a way that felt meaningful. You had gone through a divorce, you had gone through all of these other things that were happening. And the loss with your mom. So there was so much of a loss of connection and community that you had experienced. And so somebody coming together to then create a space where it wasn't a performative community, but more, gosh, we're all feeling this way. There's 2 key tenets of group therapy that are super important are the installation of hope and the universality that's created. And so if you're all in a group of people where everybody's going through grief, going through divorce, a cancer diagnosis, whatever it is, it's the idea of exactly what you said, the taking ourselves out of that place of feeling like we're alone in a well and reminding ourselves we're still overwhelmed. We still feel alone. There's still a lot to do, but there are people sitting next to you in this. And there's a comfort in that because we can get away from what shame wants us to believe, which is you are the problem. You are broken. This experience that's happening to you is because you couldn't keep up. And so at this point yet, were you aware you were in menopause?
No.
Okay. So still your body. Yeah. Okay. Your body's still going through this. You're starting to reconnect. You're starting to center, but no one has talked to you about this. No one is bringing this up. You don't have any guideposts. And so, so take us from now you're in this place of a little bit of calm, probably still some anxiety and agitation at the doorway, trying to get back in. How do you go from there to then recognizing now what your body's going through and then reconnecting there?
And I think that is part of where the mindfulness practices are so fantastic because the start of that is coming to your body and saying, this is your body. Welcome back home to your body. You're starting to tune in, to listen, to bring acceptance and compassion. And I would say to the listeners, self-compassion was my biggest single journey that I had to go on. I was conditioned to be hard on myself. And so and I remember that day when she said to me, did you, that self-compassion piece when I was then training to be a teacher, did you kind of miss that?
Did you
tune in? Did you tune in? Did you forget to do it? And I went, no. She said, did you understand what you were meant to be doing here? Well, I did and I'm
right. I checked the boxes. I got the A.
Yeah. And she just looked and she said, I think you need to rework that piece. And she gave me a fantastic book by the psychologist Christopher Germer. And she said, use this as a start point. And this was then the practice. This was this. Oh, so I speak to myself like this. Yeah. And you've been conditioned to say harsh things, to be critical when you're not as thin or your hair doesn't look like that, or you don't show up in the way that you think other people expect of you. And this was the journey. And then eventually this menopause dot started to come together. And I'm thinking, so I'm going through, or I've been through this really, and I'm learning more about where we are. And then, of course, once I stepped into menopause, I began to realize there were lots of other people, and I'm reading books and articles, and I'm thinking, this is me, this is them. Wow, this is what we go through, and no one really talks about it.
Was that helpful to see that? Was it infuriating? Was it a mix of both? Because I hear that and I think how great when you start to come to the experience of knowing what it is and that people experience it, but how frustrating and overwhelming to then go, why wasn't my medical provider talking to me
Yeah.
about this? Why didn't conversations, why didn't we learn about this in health class? Like, why do we
Yeah.
not talk about it? And then connecting it back to self-compassion, realizing that you were probably struggling with that your whole life,
Oh, yeah.
from the time you were little all the way up. But then there's a different layer of the self-criticism that comes from, because now it's not just, you're not this enough, you haven't achieved enough, you've got to do XYZ by the time you're 24 and 32 and whatever it is. But now it's not only have you not done those things, but now you're sliding backwards. And I think that's the fear when someone thinks menopause is now it's not, I already sucked and now I suck worse kind of idea.
And I think I then felt also extreme anger at times. I was very angry with the way in which my clinician, who was herself a midlife woman, had never ever done other than attempt to shame me. And, I'm very critical of many clinicians, of the gaslighting and misogyny that goes on and it's not male clinicians. In fact, I would have said that the male clinician that I did have was extremely kind and understanding, although he never mentioned the word menopause. He did a lot to support me as a human. The woman, my God, I was glad when she moved practice. She was unforgiving of anything. But of course, now I understand that some of the things that I had that weren't right were just menopause.
Right.
Yeah. They weren't anything to do with that I was a bad person or ate a bad food or didn't do this. I mean, I did what was within my capacity. And we always have the ability to change and do things, but we have to be in a space where we can do that.
Well, and I wonder too, with that clinician, I think about this so often because that's part of what got me into doing eating disorder work, was the number of clinicians I met when I was struggling with an eating disorder or struggling with my trauma recovery, that just the shaming, the judgment, the assumptions. And when I go back now, I try to find a sense of awareness around, they internalize the same biases, the same cultural norms, the same beliefs that I did. It doesn't make the way they handled things okay. It doesn't make the misses okay. It doesn't make, a friend of mine just texted me, she's pregnant with her second kid and she got really sick and she was throwing up a lot in the middle of her second trimester, I think maybe beginning of third. She went in for an appointment, she lost weight, and her doctor was praising her for having lost weight. And she said, me 5 years ago would have been excited by that. Me now is infuriated, but I can see that this is still a product of the cultural norms. And so you got to wonder if that's, your doctor maybe was doing the best they could. Maybe they were missing the mark, but I wonder if a lot of that was rooted in their own stuff too. They can't go there. They can't touch that. They can't not shame you, because if they universalize it, that means they're going to experience it, or they are experiencing it. And they're in that same place you are of, no, I got to move on the conveyor belt. I can't be with this conversation, even if my patient needs it, because I have too much shame and fear that's stopping me from going there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was possibly what it was, because no shaming in her. I mean, but she was not super thin and super fit. She was far from it. Yet she was shaming me and telling me that I was pretty much a bad person and a bad mother because I wasn't eating quinoa every night. And I'm like thinking, my child is starving. I don't care if it's pasta, quite frankly, right now. This is it. And then I felt a lot of infuriated. I think infuriated is the right word, about the way in which women of a certain age are treated in the workplace.
Yeah. I mean, so you've got this internal, like, all your grief, all of your pain, then you're in the corporate world and you're seeing it. And you've probably always seen it or known it, but you're really seeing it now. And the more you do this work, I could imagine, was that the pull that then is like, I need to shift gears because I need to be a part of changing this.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for me, it was then this corporate role is going to end. And that didn't mean that it ended there, but I set a plan in motion that I was going to move myself out of an environment which was so unsupportive. And, I was side hustling, teaching mindfulness at a women's health clinic. And just my eyes were opened at this gynecological clinic, because then I was thinking, well, some ways I haven't had as horrific experience as these people have, but the system has just let these women down. They are broken. This isn't right. This isn't the way it's meant to be. And it just pushed me to know that I was going to be part of making change and not being part of the status quo.
So now, let's fast forward a little bit to here. I still don't feel like we're talking about it. It's changed, I can imagine. And you're a part of that. I mean, I've listened to some of the different podcast episodes you've released, the work that you're doing, connecting with other people that are doing this work. We're really trying to change the conversation on a global level. And what is it that you think, why is there such a sort of collective resistance to really reframing and making the changes? What do you think it is that's getting in our way?
Well, I think there's probably two things. One is big pharma. We just have to put it out there. They have now seen that they can drive their agenda here. And so they are part of creating a new set of shaming narratives that in some ways are just as bad, if not worse, than the let's not talk about it, let's whisper in the corners about the shame, about the change, in the change.
Yeah.
When they're like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Now we're going to have a new narrative. And their new narrative is that women are hormone deficient. And I'm like, well, I am not deficient. Sorry, that's not a label I want to have. And that in some ways, if you're not on this hormone therapy for the rest of your life, and we're not talking about good and bad and taking sides here, but the narrative that you are disordered, diseased, deficient, and that your life is going straight down, straight downhill, that's it, unless you take this thing for the rest of your life. No scientific evidence, just spin.
Well, and then preying on people that are in a state of grief, even though they're probably not labeling it as that, but my face looks different. My skin looks different. I've even experienced that now being in my mid-30s. I don't know if it's after having my daughter. I don't know if it's the trauma of a pandemic, if it's just life. I don't think I need to know the answer. I'm just aware that my body has changed, that now it's even getting a period feels, terrible. Like it's days of different experiences. And so then when someone comes in and they go, well, here's this thing, and you don't have to look at those wrinkles, and you don't have to feel that pain, and you can have your sex drive back in the same way, and you can feel this and that. Of course, people are going to want that because they're told what you're having happen to you. It doesn't feel good. At least a lot of it doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
But this is also preying into that, what I call the Band-Aid solution. Instead of getting curious about what's happening with our body, how do I have to show up for it differently now? Like, I know that some of the pain I have and my experiences, even around menstruation and my period, if I do yoga more often, completely different experience. If I'm more aware of my water intake, if I'm more aware of my sleep is going to look a little different for a day or two.
Yeah.
How do I shift some of what I'm eating around that time and responding to my body? It's more work, but I enjoy it when I get into it. And I think that it's the two parts kind of in big pharma. Then I want to get back to point number 2 for you, because I know you haven't had a chance yet, but there's this idea of the quick fix. Here, take this, everything's going to be fine. And you don't have to grieve your life changing, because we timestamp our good years. I think depending on your culture, it might look different, but it's, mid-20s to early 30s, and then everything sucks. So it's just, you got to want to protect that instead of being excited about these new pieces. And so, so I'm on the bandwagon. I think big pharma is a big part. I think that's the layers.
Is a big part of what's happening, is that this is, and it's not empowering, actually. It's dressed up as women being empowered.
Right.
But it's not. And so I think there's a big agenda happening there. Even though the conversation has elevated, what we now also have is women being seen as a group to be sold to. And and that uses shame and guilt and fear in a different way. Big pharma's doing that. But every time we look around, somebody is trying to sell you something here.
Mm-hmm.
This supplement, this product, this, and everything suddenly gets a sticker called menopause on it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't particularly want a piece of skincare that's got menopause sticker on it. Why? I'm quite happy with the way it was. I'm enough to contend with trying to avoid anti-aging. I don't need to have another sticker. But suddenly everything is targeted at you, and that you have to have all this stuff. So what are women doing? They're opening their wallets and constantly shopping for stuff. For what? And it's using this. And then we're seeing lots of personal training going on. So yes, we do have sarcopenia, which is loss of muscle. Yes, we do have a risk of osteopenia. We're getting older, and menopause doesn't help that, because estrogen is very important for many of those functions. But we don't have to be pressurized into suddenly looking at 63, I can do chin-ups like a 22. Why is, and Instagram is particularly bad for this at the moment, before and after shots of midlife women lifting phenomenal weights, and somehow women seem to now think that if we're not doing this, you're failing. Gone is the day when, yoga and a walk seems to be fine. This drive towards these sort of power women is kind of like, oh, so I go to the gym, and yes, I do weights workouts because I know that they will be beneficial to me.
Right.
But I'm not attempting to build a six pack.
Right.
And I think there's this whole shift of getting women to look a certain way and to spend money in ways that is, again, really about saying, if you don't do this, you're either not a good person, you don't care about yourself, kinds of messages. And I think on layering on top of the messages from Big Pharma, we have women who are lost, confused, and therefore they're afraid.
So what do we do? How do we, everything you're saying, it's the same message in a different iteration when it comes to new moms, having a little toddler, and you've got to get your body to look a certain way. And so you should love being a mom. And, Instagram reminds you, rotate the toys, color code the books, do these things, make sure everything is all set up. Here's how you're a perfect mom, but also make sure your body doesn't look like you ever carried a kid. And here's how. And so it's the same messages, and everybody's selling the skincare and there's this, what is it, hydroloric acid or something, but it's in like everything now. And I was reading the ingredients of something to my 3-year-old. She goes, well, what's that? And I was like, I don't know. I think it's like the new in thing to not show that you've lived is like what it's for. And I don't really know, but that's what I seem to see it now, because everybody's promoting it. And so I think about this. I think about, I've had eating disorder groups, or I've been working with clients with eating disorders where like, gosh, I'm realizing I'm chasing my basically my teenage body. I need to have my body before I had this, because that's when, you were the tiny, cute version of yourself. And so these different ideas, what do we do? What do we as women, as people in the feminism sphere, again, even if you don't identify as female, how do we change this conversation? And if you're the person that's sitting there and they're going, oh my gosh, that's me. I'm lonely, afraid. I bought all these products. I'm looking at them on the shelves right now. They work temporarily, and then I'm back to the next fix. How do we help them know that there's a different way?
I think role models are really important. And it is important. And I think there are movements coming now where people are saying, well, it's perfectly normal to have curves. It is okay to look like this. And I think also showing everyday women doing and achieving fantastic stuff without all this. And I think there's obviously a caveat to that we don't want to end up in polar camps where we go, I'm this and I'm that. So we have to say that, to start to say is it's menopause your way. what the choice you make is the choice you make.
Right.
And we have to show more ordinary women doing fantastic things. And the fact is that ordinary women are doing fantastic things. Women are changing careers. They're going off and whitewater rafting. I've just had somebody who's used to be a whitewater rafter competitive, and she started a business in Canada with women over 40 who want to learn to whitewater raft. And here there are 70 and 80-year-olds whitewater raftings. We can go bicycling. We can do all kinds of things, start new businesses, go back to university, build our lives in all sorts of different ways. But there has to be a groundswell that promotes that more and more and more as a sense of we don't have to fit the sort of this stereotype where we're always trying to look younger. We're being ourselves here, just celebrating women just being themselves and changing their lives immensely well. And I think counterbalance the conversation that you have to be medicated to the eyeballs,
right,
as the only way.
Right.
And there are times when that hormone therapy is essential. That's not the question. But the answer is there's so much that we can be empowered. There's no money really to be made out of telling people to eat a healthy diet and go for a walk.
Right.
So people like me say things like that all the time. But I think those of us in the forefront can live that. We can show that what we are doing is good. It's okay. And it's okay to be you. And if you've only managed to go for a walk around the block or whatever it is you felt like today, that's fine. If you want to lie down and do nothing, that's also fine.
Well, I think what you're describing, my brain sort of jumped to two spots as you were talking. So the first being the notion of I separated out by shame-driven living versus values-driven living. So the idea that there are going to be some people listening to this that are like, I do want to lift the weights. I do want to do these things. It gives me a sense of connection to myself I've never had. Like, we just bought a house and I flippin' love yard work. Didn't think I would. Thought it was really going to bum me out. I love using the big clippers. I love pruning trees. I want to do this. I want to learn how to use a lawnmower. Never had the chance. And I want to do that. And so it's a choice. And I also, again, I love working out. I love weightlifting. I found that I really enjoy it. I want to be able to do that because I want to, not because I'm sold on the idea that I have to. And as you were saying this, and I was kind of thinking about values versus shame, I thought about this as, so my daughter's 3. And a big focus for me is to create the most expansive and exploratory view of the world as possible, because I am well aware I don't have the answers. And I think that's the one place I can get it right, is to admit I am not going to be the right source all the time for her, and her job is to explore. And so you go back and you think about how many of us when we were her age knew maybe 5 careers. So there was only a certain number of careers that were taught to us. And if you were, especially if we think when we were all young and it was much more about binaries, boy, girl jobs, and only these, and you can only do this. So then there's that. And then you get a little bit older, and then there's only one pathway to success. You go to college. Depending on, the part of the world you live in, maybe you get a gap year. In the US here, you absolutely don't. You go to college right away, or it means something bad about you. No tech school, no years off. You can't do that. That is not allowed. So you go here. And there's this sort of buildup that everything, you're going to get this master experience in college, and then you peak in this job, and then everything's going to be great, and then it's downhill. But we don't give this idea. I even think back to, I was a career peer advisor my junior and senior year of college. And one of the advisors I worked with, I'm still in touch with her. She has been instrumental, even for me as an adult, changing my reframes, or I guess maybe helping me reframe the way I look at things. She's like, we're not talking to people about the rest of their lives. We're just talking to them about the next right step for them. Yeah. And I think that is the change, is what you're describing. I love that. But that is a shift to thinking about we peak in our 20s when you're supposed to have the best job. College is supposed to be amazing. You're supposed to want college and know exactly what you want to do for your life. You're supposed to find a partner. You have to want that. And that's supposed to be your life partner. And then, there's the, how many kids are you supposed to have, the type of house you're supposed to have, the money, there's all this, and you're supposed to get it then, and then just maintain it until you die. And that's essentially the experience. And then everybody expects you to start to hate your life in the middle of your life. And then you just sort of slowly get old and mean, and then you just sit there till you die. And so now it's going, well, why can't you pick what you want to do for the next few years and then be open to changing it? Why can't I be a therapist and then decide I don't want to be in the therapy room and change that up? Why can't I do this? And if I go, gosh, I don't love this anymore, reserve the right to change my mind. And I think that's what you're describing is women being empowered, people in general, but I know specifically we're thinking women in the state of perimenopause, in menopause, wherever we're at, going, you can reserve the right to try new things and to change your mind, whether that comes to learning about your body in menopause, what you love. And that is what we need to do. That is the conversation we need to have.
It is. And it isn't about all the time about symptom this and symptom that. It's about mindset. It's about how we think it. And I call it, there's a book written called Mind Over Menopause, and I still use that. How do I create a mindset that allows me to actually create a vision, a plan? If I said to somebody, do you have a financial plan, a career plan? They'd probably answer yes. But if I said to you, do you have a menopause plan? They kind of go, huh?
Yeah.
I said, well, why don't you have a vision for how you'd like this to be? Why wouldn't you lay out a vision and says, ideally it's a plan, it can change.
Right.
But you might say, I want to have a natural menopause. Now, or the other person might say, well, give me every drug there is. That's fine. That's your plan. It doesn't matter. But you have a plan, who's going to be on your team and support you, who's your cheerleader. Work it out.
What I love about that, I think about that with, very similar to a birth plan. I agree. I think there's still the need to, and for a lot of women who've been conditioned to have all the answers, to be perfect, to know exactly how things are going to go, flexibility and change can be hard because it's, well, no, this is how it's supposed to be. And I was supposed to be able to do this. So when my plan changes, like when I had a C-section because my daughter was breech and we tried to turn her and that didn't work. And, you have to be able to be okay when the plan needs to change and to give yourself grace. But the thing I think is super helpful about that is you're helping yourself create a response to something that you get to change your mindset around. You can be excited. You can be curious. If you wait until things happen and that fear comes up, that panic comes up, you're primed for reactivity. So then when somebody comes to you and they're like, here's the answer, here's this is what I did, this is how everything works. Now you're chasing a solution and absolution of symptoms and pain and the experience instead of the curiosity and the roadmap and the exploration that comes with it.
Yeah. And I feel for me that if we can make that more the norm rather than the exception, we have empowerment in a different way. And there's a lot about also communication. And I think it's great someone's telling you there are 84 symptoms. Next minute somebody tells you there's 200. I'm just like, whatever, everything isn't menopause. Let's just say that out there.
Right.
But if you know how to manage conversations about this, then we begin to say, how do I have a conversation with my clinician that actually achieves something? How do I have a conversation with people at work? They may not have a menopause policy, but they have to treat humans like humans in most workplaces. So we have the right to ask, often for flexibility. It's not in every role. And I know that and I understand that because it depends how empowered you are. The lower paid we are, the more, 0-hour contract crap we've got going on, the harder that is. But many people are able to have some sort of conversation, but we know how to structure that conversation. We don't have to go into the details of our symptoms. That's got nobody else's business except you and your doctor and maybe someone close to you. And we also need to know how to have those conversations with those closest to us. And so there are different types of conversations. But if no one guides you and helps you about the sort of questions you might want to ask, how you want to talk about this, then we're in overwhelm. And we come to the clinician and we're like, well, there's other, and we just kind of, and they've got 7 minutes to look at you. So come and think, okay, this is happening to me. I've noticed this. Could I be here? Am I a candidate for this? What do you advise? And work on the top 2 things that are bothering with you that time round. You might get more solution. And I'd rather see that as a way. And if you don't like what you're getting, we'll change provider. But that's a different, that's a different thing. But every time we can do that, we are having ourselves in the driver's seat.
Well, and I think what you're saying too that's important is this process is hard. Life is hard. There was a day I was like, is living just figuring out how to get through the next hard thing? And my mom was like, yep, that's what it is. And then the goal is to figure out how you find joy and peace in the process of doing that. And I was like, cool. That should have been what we learned in school, because this sucks, because I didn't understand that. And you're not, and again, obviously as the therapist, we don't talk about emotions enough. People don't know how to label them. Same as you saying everything gets labeled as menopause. Not everything is stress and anxiety. There's a lot of other emotions we experience.
Yeah.
But I think, we're not dismissing this is hard, and it is different and it's scary. And there's parts you have to, and I'm kind of thinking about what you're describing as taking the shame out of it is giving yourself space to explore, to not feel like there's a right answer or that somebody else gets to dictate that, whether that's the sort of collective they of the cultural ideals, big pharma, or the individuals in your life.
Yes.
But then there's also this taking away the shame of it's okay to grieve. Grieving doesn't mean that you have to now erase it or make everything okay, but it's okay to grieve that your skin looks different, or that your sex drive is different, or that your energy has changed, or you have pain. It's also okay for you to grieve the fact that now you can't unsee that you are older, and you've been taught that that's a bad thing. We can't get rid of that. That's in our brains.
Oh, yes.
So it's that piece of saying, that's normal. You've got that in you. That is wired in your DNA to feel these things. Let's just not perpetuate the idea that you are somehow messed up or broken, or you caused this, or you're letting people down. This is a collective experience. And if we can not only put you in the driver's seat to think about what you want and need and how you can explore, but also to know you are allowed to talk about how it's hard. Without feeling like you have to run with your purse to go buy something.
And you have to be able to have the self-nurture part of this is phenomenal. This moment to say, how do I feel today? Oh, well, I don't actually feel that great today. But you know what? That's okay. And as those being able to accept ourselves, never mind anybody else outside of us, but we accept that there are days we're just not on our game. There are days, and I'm working with someone at the moment, and she has a lot of issues. She's beautiful, but I said to her, "How are you going?" She said she's been a professional, athlete. She said, "I don't feel like going off to do this thing right now." And I said, "Well, what do you feel like doing?" And she said, "Well, I'm kind of taking it slow and doing this meditation in the morning." And I said, "Well, how does that feel?" And she said, "It feels good." So I said, "So do it." And she said, "Yeah, you've empowered me to feel that I can." And I said, because that's more important than making some appointment to do something that you haven't got the energy to do. And I think when we can give ourselves permission to, sometimes we just want to lie down at this time. It's exhausting to be busy in our lives, because lives don't stop, and to have all this change that is psychological and physical and spiritual. You're changing so much of you, and not sometimes feel tired and you'd like to die down. Well, that you wouldn't be a human if you didn't feel that.
Well, it goes back to even thinking about when my daughter was born, and My husband and I were talking about how much you can grow, like how they can literally grow like an inch overnight and wake up in an entirely new body and suddenly they're bumping into things, but also how much their brains fire and change.
Yeah.
And as a sort of neurodevelopmental and psychological piece, they do that.
Mm.
That's not specific just to kids. Sure, what that looks like, we experience, we're like, how do they do this today? Like, that's so crazy. That's like a totally new human. But if we sort of open ourselves up to that too, I think it's realizing the phrase I use when I think about my life in general is how do I create and have flexible grace in a relentless pursuit to living my best life? And
Yeah.
in that, design is iterative. And so when I think about, again, going back to my 3-year-old, what works one day doesn't work the next day. And I have
Yeah.
to release the shame that I have somehow messed up and say, different day, different bodies, different people.
Yeah.
We're doing the best we can. And I think if we could do that for ourselves, to think, gosh, the stuff I was excited about, I think about even drinking and partying in college. I don't want to stay out past 9 o'clock now. Just doesn't give me balance. I don't like how I feel. I
No.
could do it. I don't want to. So the design
Yeah.
of my life looks different than when I was
Yeah.
20 and I might go out with my friends and hang out until bar time or stay up all night talking
Mhm.
with somebody at their house. I don't want to do that anymore. And so for your client,
Yeah.
it's like, gosh, that worked for you for so long and you loved it.
Yeah.
Can you celebrate that you loved it and now celebrate that your life looks different?
Exactly. And I mean, I think that's what it is. It's this. And I think that we forget that menopause has a kind of end. I mean, we go through
Hmm.
perimenopause, there is this watershed, and there are a few years. I mean, it doesn't sort of instant. That's what I don't like about the messaging, that somehow now it's a different. It takes a few
Yes.
years. Your body is still going through a fair bit of change. But I loved the book called The Upgrade by Dr.
Mm.
Luann Brizendine. And when she said, our brains upgrade as we get older, we become less anxious, less multitasky, and
Mm.
we are more creative, calm, and we don't put up with a lot of the BS that we put up with. Well, I think that is a fantastic thing to hold in the horizon. Think that's going to be most of us. And if I'm a
Yeah.
bit feistier when I'm older, well, I don't care actually,
Yeah.
because I don't have the patience to
Right.
bend to everybody's will. But that's what I think we need to recognize. It isn't going to be forever, and
Mm.
not every day is hell.
Yeah.
So we have to step away from that because, I've worked with chronic pain patients, and even their days are not hell every day. And
Right.
every hour of every day, it's not at 100%. There are
Right.
moments that are flow. And in perimenopause, you can have times when the think, I'm fine.
Yep.
Then it can come back, or you can have a difficult patch. I mean, it can be anywhere from 3 to 15 years. So, you don't know, you're not in control of that trajectory, but knowing that there's flow in this journey will help us to ease through it. And it does end. And on the other
Yeah.
side, you do feel very different. You have to go around and ask lots of us who are now in our 60s how we feel. And we go, I feel great. I'm wild water swimming, or I'm doing
Yeah.
this, or I'm whatever it is we're doing.
Yeah.
And that's the vision we want to hold up, that for most of us, and you look back and you think, yeah, bits of it were very hard, but it
Hmm.
wasn't every day. Lots of really good stuff happened too.
Yeah. I love that because I think, two takeaways that I'm bringing from this conversation is one, that how the power of our mindset, which is something you mentioned early on for you that really changed things. Because again, I'm comparing a lot of this to me being a mom, but I had her, and then 2 weeks later was the pandemic, and it was really easy for your mindset to just become like, everything is hard, parenting sucks, I can't do this. And then, and then we bought a house a month ago, and it was the same thing. There's all this stuff that has to be done, things
Mhm.
that we found out after we bought the house. And it's like, everything sucks. I don't like this. And it's like, wait a minute. I love my house. And there are moments that are really hard, but not all of it. There are moments of pure
Yeah.
joy. And I love my kid. There are moments that are the deepest, darkest moments of shame I've ever experienced in my life,
Yeah.
but they're actually way less frequent than what my brain is trying to sell me on, because
Yeah.
that is shame. Shame wants you to see it. It's like glitter. You want
Mm.
it to be everywhere. And so I think that is one big key takeaway. And then I think the second thing from what you said that I'm holding on to is the importance of body intelligence and connection. And so for many of us, even before we're at this stage of experiencing menopause and in it, how do we create an open channel of communication with our body when we have been trained to close it off and to see our body as an inconvenience? So I think, those are the two I'm holding on to. I've also written down all the books that you said to make sure that I'm looking at them, adding them to my shelf.
Yeah.
I'm curious for you as we come to a close and you think about, you'll have two sets of, three. You'll have the set of listeners that will experience menopause, haven't yet. You'll have the set of listeners that are in menopause, are experiencing it. And then you'll have people that won't experience menopause or are supporting people that have.
Yeah.
But I really want to focus on the people that will or are experiencing it. What do you want them? Is there something you would give them as here's the next thing? Here's the one thing I want you to hold on to or to try moving forward to unlock that journey and curiosity for you?
If I was before menopause, this is not my journey yet, is start to understand what it's about. Learn, because whatever we know, so much of our fear and shame comes from our lack of understanding. So find somewhere reputable. And the North American Menopause Society is scientifically correct. It's evidence. It is calm and rational. It's not the most exciting website you've ever, or even someone like Let's Talk Menopause. If you know nothing, and this is going to be your trajectory, start with being informed, because from information, you can then begin to create plans, how you want to do things, be there, prepare early. In Chinese medicine, they like women to start in their 30s, lay that foundation and know that, you don't know what it's going to be like. I can't tell you, but the more you know, the better outcome you're likely to have during the journey. If you're in it, my first advice is breathe, stop, just, decompress a bit. This is a great space if you're there for grounding, for mindful practices, and creating a bit of bandwidth, create some space between you and all the intensity that's not only coming from perimenopause, but is coming from so much we think we should do or must do, or ought to do, or got to do, or whatever it is, and start to create more space for yourself. And my favorite thing to say to people is become a rest rebel.
Ooh, I love it. You need to make t-shirts. I think that would be,
yeah, that's the t-shirt. I'm a rest rebel.
Yes, I love it. Or just even that sticker to remind people. So before those stickers are on the market, everybody grab a Post-it note, put that on there and put it somewhere you see it every day. Because I think that is the essence of it, is to learn how to rest, how to be, how to give yourself that space to exist in the now, to stop chasing this point or running away from this point in your future, and just be in it, whatever it is, and allow it to be present.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
This has been absolutely fantastic. I have been jotting down all of the resources. I'll make sure that they're in the show notes for people.
Wonderful.
There's so many beautiful things that I think we can take from this. Where can people find you if they are like, oh my gosh, I've met my person, I need to change this up and I want to be a part of this conversation and Clarissa's the one to help me? Where do they go?
Go to my website, because there you'll have the information. And that's my name, ClarissaKristjansson.com. And there you can find out the work I do, how to listen to my podcast, how you can connect with me on social, because it's one place, not a million places.
Yes.
But go there and connect. Send me a message. I will always respond.
Oh, I love it. And I'm very much the same frame. Give people one place to go. I had a sales coach who told me a confused buyer never buys. And I think it's that idea of just realizing it's not about buying. It's about recognizing that we are in a constant state of input overload. So we just need to give each other clearer, more specific directives of where to go and what to do, because we want for things that become so overwhelming when our brain's like, wait, I've just consumed too much content. So this is fantastic. I will have her website and everything down in the show notes, along with all those beautiful resources that she shared. I don't know about you all, but I am going to order the upgrade and start reading that now. That sounds fantastic. And just make sure that you check out all these other spaces. Again, also, you'll see that link to her podcast in there. Listen to our episode if you want to go deeper on shame. We talked about that there, and also so many other fantastic episodes. Clarissa, thank you. This has been incredible. Listeners, I hope you are walking away with as many notes as I am. This has just been fantastic. And for everybody else, be a rest rebel this week. Give yourselves those moments of pause. And when you're ready, I will see you back here for another episode.